So what's the wood on your banjo?
Maple and curly maple. But then for the fretboard, I used Purple Heart. I had some Purple Heart in my inventory over there, so I used purple, which is very unusual.
I always wanted to build a banjo. Larry Albert, he's done a lot of work like that.
Yeah. And then I inlaid an eagle in the headstock, a real pretty eagle, multiple part eagle.
Mother of Pearl?
Mother of Pearl, real pretty. I'll show it to you. Yeah. Good, my friend. In fact, Jesse wanted to build a banjo, so that's how I got into it. So we built two. He built one, and I built one in my shop.
Did you steam the pot yourself?
No, we bought the pot, and we bought neck blanks, and we machined them to our configuration. And then we did all the custom work ourselves, all the inlay work.
I never could play fretless. You had a fretless down there.
Well, you know, I think I could. It's just a matter of
my brain.
Yeah, but you know, when you think about it though, once you get used to, you know, particular song, I mean, you don't really look at the frets. You find the places automatically, right? So I would think after a while you'd get used to it, and because you know right away if you're not hitting the right fret.
I've seen a few that have lines just drawn on.
Yeah.
Just for reference.
Just guide. Yeah.
Well, Tanner, everything good on your side?
I think so.
Just let me know when you're ready.
Whenever you are.
Yeah.
Let you get a drink of water first.
Yeah. Got a bit of a cold going here, or allergies or something. So.
Yeah.
Who do you want me to look at? You want me to look at you? Okay.
We framed you with the clock behind you.
Did you? Thank you. That's clocks are important to me.
I know. That's what I
Is it for him?
Should this jacket be buttoned or open, do you think?
I think it's fine.
I think it's good there, so that way you can't see the wire.
Yeah, we'll hide it there.
All right.
We'll start off with Dr. Andrews. Just tell us your name, where you grew up, and how you got into higher education.
My name is Wayne Andrews. I'm currently the president of Morehead State University, have been since January of 2005. I grew up in central Massachusetts, a little town called Spencer, about the size of Morehead. And when I took the job in Morehead, people said, you know, it's going to be a problem for you in a small town. And I said, no, I grew up in Morehead. It just wasn't Morehead, it was Spencer, Massachusetts. Went to local school there and went in the Army right out of high school for 4 years. After a year and a half in Vietnam, I came home and said, I think I need to do something else with my life, and so I went to college. Was accepted at Fitchburg State College in Fitchburg, Massachusetts. Did my undergraduate degree there, was going to become a teacher. And my advisor at the time, Dr. Everett Israel, who's still a very dear friend, talked me into going to graduate school. And he had finished his doctoral work at West Virginia University. So next thing you know, I graduated from Fitchburg and I'm in West Virginia. Spent 3.5 years there, did my master's and my doctorate there, and then started into higher education teaching. So that was really my beginning place.
So before you came to Morehead State University, I actually went back and watched your investiture that Tim Creedmoor produced many years
Yes.
ago. We found it.
Yeah, well, good.
It was very informative, especially trying to find some of these questions for you. But tell us what position you held immediately before you came to Morehead as president.
Yeah, I'm going to back up just a little bit on you. So I finished my graduate work at West Virginia University. I took the first job, the best job I could get out of graduate school was at Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois. I signed up there and as an assistant professor in the Department of Technology, and I was there for 10 years. I went through the ranks, became a tenured full professor, and then left there in 1987 to go to East Tennessee State University. And I had a wonderful career at East Tennessee State. In fact, I could have easily spent my entire, the balance of my career at East Tennessee State. It was a wonderful place for me and for my family. Started there as a department chair in engineering technology. And then I was really blessed to work for several presidents that were people builders. And one of them asked me to serve in the role of the SACS co-chair for the campus reaccreditation visit. That was long about 1990. I'd only been there 3 years. And so I did that, and as a result of the good work that we did in that process, the president, Dr. Roy Nix, asked me if I wanted to go on a national fellowship, and I went to, with the American Council on Education and had an ACE fellowship for a year, which I left the campus and went to the University of Tennessee, and I worked with Joe Johnson and Bill Snyder, the president and the chancellor there for a year, and it really opened a lot of perspectives. Came back to the university, served as Dr. Nix's assistant, his executive assistant, for about 2.5 years. And then I volunteered to serve as an interim vice president in student life. Now, I didn't have any student life background. I was purely an academic, but our long-serving vice president was retiring, and the area really needed some attention. And I said, you know, let me go over there and try this. I think it would be something I'd enjoy. So I served as an interim vice president for about 3 years, maybe. We had a presidential change in there. Dr. Paul Stanton, a friend of mine, became president, a vascular surgeon from East Tennessee State that stepped in the role of president. And he wanted to do a national search, and I decided to apply for the job, and I got the job. So I served another 4 years, I think. So I don't remember exactly, but 5 or 6 or 7 years as a vice president for student life. And then Dr. Stanton said, okay, you're having enough fun. You need to come back to central administration. I want you to serve as the vice president for administration. He created a new position, and chief operating officer of the university. So that's the position I held when I became president here at Morehead State University. And I had been in that role probably for 6 or so years. And I had a broad span of control from personnel, budgets, institutional planning, all that administrative kind of stuff, technology and so forth. And so it was a great learning opportunity for me. And that was a springboard for me to be interested in this job, because I had a lot of responsibility there.
Well, Tanner and I now, including yourself, have spoken to all the living presidents of Morehead State University, and we've all asked them the same question and asked you here. What was the environment like here at Morehead State University when your administration began?
It's really a nice question because, of course, one of the things that we all experience when we come to a new place is a place, a culture, a new group of people, a situation. There are a lot of similarities here to where I came from in East Tennessee. In fact, you know, folks ask me about that, coming over from East Tennessee to Morehead. And my initial quip was, it's just like going over the mountain to meet your cousins. I mean, we're all Appalachian folks. You know, I'd been at East Tennessee 17 years, and I knew the history of the region. I knew the culture of the Appalachian service region. I knew some of the challenges that the institution faced back there and that we faced here, very similar. So I didn't step into something that was unknown territory. In fact, it was familiar territory. However, it's a different place, and the culture was different. Here in Morehead, a little bit more of a closed community, meaning more rural than Johnson City, Tennessee, where I came from. A little bit smaller school. When I left East Tennessee State, if I recall, we had about 11,500 students. When I came here, we were just a little under 10,000. We were, I would say, at East Tennessee, we were a little more regionally engaged than we were at Morehead, meaning we had a broader service region. So those were some of the things. Then, on a very particular basis, though, what I found here was an opportunity to help improve some things. I spent the first 6 months meeting personally with every department on campus by myself. I didn't take anybody with me. I just went around, and I still have the notes. I went around and I sat with faculty and staff, and I asked 3 questions. You know, what do you really like about this place? What do you think needs to be improved? And if we had some money to help you get one thing going, what would it be? And it was very informative. And you know, what I heard from people was, we'd been kind of stagnant as an institution. We hadn't had much change. We weren't moving the agenda. And there seemed to be a pent-up interest in kind of moving the place forward. And I heard that very broadly from all the units on campus. And then the second thing I heard was that we were not very good stewards of place. So the condition of our buildings, the condition of our physical plant wasn't at all what I wanted it to be. I had all that facility responsibility at my last place, and I was intimately familiar with how things should be and how they could be. And so in addition to meeting with folks, I walked through every building on campus and took notes. And then I called people together and I gave my impressions. And I don't think it was a happy time for some people because, as I said to folks, we can have old buildings, because many of our buildings are old, but they need to be clean, they need to be painted, and they need to be kept up to date. And so that really caused us to start on a process of rehabilitation. And so we've done a lot of that here on campus. In addition to those kinds of physical facility things, we have done a lot of work in the curriculum with the core curriculum, general education requirements, program updates. And so I think now that if you would go around and have a similar conversation to what I did 11 years ago, people would probably say, enough with change. Let's hold things constant for a while. But the nature of the world we live in is we've got to change to keep abreast of what's going on.
When you look back at the history of the university, especially in the post-Adrian Doran years, it really wasn't until your administration, Dr. Andrews, that a lot of new construction, building, and programs have begun and finished. It's still ongoing. Was this something you had to work pretty hard to get started and finished?
Well, it was really obvious to me as I toured around and looked at what we had and talked to people and tried to understand hopes and dreams and aspirations that we needed to have some momentum to improve things on campus. And one of the most dramatic ways you can do that is with buildings. And so one of the first things I did was I started tearing things down. So if you'd go back and look at the campus the way it was just before I came, what you would find, for example, where the Recreation and Wellness Center is, were the old duplex apartments that had been there since post-World War II. And none of them were being used. They were vacated buildings that were in disrepair. Right along that whole stretch where the Recreation Wellness Center is now, Wilson and Regents Hall, two large residence halls, were not being used for residences anymore. Space Science was jammed into one of those buildings, and the other building was essentially closed. The old MYK house up here on the top of the hill was there, the old swimming pool behind the president's home. I mean, the campus was littered with buildings that were old, not used, and in disrepair. So step one was tear down and get rid of the stuff that was no longer usable. Clean up the mess. And coincidentally then, I was very fortunate to be able to establish strong relationships with our legislative leaders. Representative Rodkey Atkins is still the House Majority Floor Leader. He was at the time. Graduate of Morehead State, strong advocate of us. At the time, Senator Charlie Borders was the #2 person in the Senate. He's a Morehead alum, very proud of the institution. Representative John Will Stacy, who's now retired from the General Assembly, but also a Morehead alum, and someone that I had to reestablish some relationship with. But those three individuals in particular wanted to help us move the institution forward. They were looking for positive things to help engage in. So the very first project we took on was the Space Science Center. Dr. Ben Malphus created that idea along with the previous president, Dr. Ron Eaglin, the curriculum, but they had no facility, no plans for a facility. So that very first year, in the spring of '05, we started planning. We had some planning money. We turned our attention to that, and we said, let's figure out what we need. Rocky Atkins championed that, and Senator Borders helped make that happen over a 2-biennial budget. Well, that got everybody's attention. That was the first academic building built on this campus since the Doran administration. And everybody was proud of that because the building itself is a showplace. It's unusual, it's highly specialized, but it's a statement about, in Morehead, Kentucky, we study space science. I mean, think about what that statement is. And if you look at where we are with that program today, it's an amazing journey to a place that's, we're just at the edge of the universe. Big things to come. So that was the first thing we did. Interestingly, the students came to me in the spring of '05 and they said, Jason Marion was president of the student body. Jason's now a professor at Eastern Kentucky University. He got his PhD from the Ohio State University 3 years ago. Jason came to me with some student leaders and he said, we want a recreation center like you built back at East Tennessee State. And I said, well, Jason, I'd love for us to have a place like that, but the students will have to pay for it. The Commonwealth won't provide money for that kind of a project. Jason said, if we can plan it, I think we can get the students to support it. So we put a group together, we sent them to look at facilities. They visited James Madison University, Western Kentucky University, Eastern Kentucky, East Tennessee State. We sent them all around looking at places. They came back and sat down with me and they said, this is what we want. They gave us a list. So we hired an architect. We didn't have any funding. We hired an architect, spent, I don't remember, probably a couple $100,000, and we did the initial planning. And then again, we went back to the General Assembly, and we had some champions there that I previously mentioned, Rocky, John Will, Charlie Borders, and they got behind it. Now, the state didn't put the money in, but we needed the authorization from the General Assembly, and they helped provide that. And the students agreed to a fee, $100 per student per semester until those bonds are paid off. We thought the facility would cost $30 million. That's what the estimates were. Construction at the time we built it was really in the tank. There were lots of contractors looking for work. We actually built the facility for $23 million. It was a bargain. Well, that really, I mean, think about how things have changed on this campus since that facility was open. It's changed the way I think we feel about ourselves. There's a healthier dimension to the student body as well as the faculty and staff. People love to go there and work out. It's a gathering place for students. It's a very healthy place to be. Well, then we started thinking some more about what are the other needs that we have. Nursing and imaging sciences, two really strong applied science programs. We're both located in Reed Hall. Space was not really adequate, not state-of-the-art. And so as we started talking to internally, we also began talking with partners. Mark Neff at the hospital, the folks at the University of Kentucky, and you know, Rocky Adkins again was right in the middle of this. He was wanting to do something to help our community. St. Clair needed badly to have a modern family practice clinic. What they had back in '05 were clinics in small houses on the property where their parking lot is now between the Share building and the hospital. Very, very inadequate. And so we sat down as a planning team with the folks from the medical school at the University of Kentucky. Dean Pearman at the time, a great partner. He's now the president of the University of Maryland, Baltimore campus, I think. But Dean Pearman was a great partner. Mark Neff from the hospital. Gerald DeMoss, who was the Dean of Science and Technology at the time on our team, led our effort. And we did, I think we did the best job of designing a building. Of any of the buildings we built, that's the best one. Because we really listened well to the people that were going to live in there and offer their programs. And we built it the way they want it built. And we had enough money to do it well. That's a $30 million state-funded building. There's a partnership between our institutions. So we offer nursing and imaging sciences there. UK has their rural medicine, their rural medical program there with the second 2 years, as well as a physician's assistant, nurse practitioner, and the hospital has a fabulous clinic and other spaces. It's a great example of a partnership. So, you know, there you go. In a matter of, I don't know what that, 4, 5, 6 of those first years, $16.5 million for space science, $23 million for the Student Rec Center, and $30 million for the Center for Health Education and Research. People on campus, people in the community started to ask, well, boy, what are they doing at Morehead? Something happening there. And as you pointed out, not since Adrian Doran had any of this actually occurred. So it's not about what I did, it's about what we did together. It was a great partnership effort. We had legislative partners, we had community partners through the hospital, we had partners at the University of Kentucky, our students were partners, and so we got a lot done those first couple of years. And of course there have been other things that we've done as well. In the meantime, we embarked on a plan to renovate residence halls. The first thing we did was we got rid of 2 big ones that were junk. When we built the rec center, we needed parking, so we took down Wilson and Regents Hall that had been sitting vacant, as I mentioned previously, and created that big parking lot. And that got a lot of stir going, and that was a good thing. We've renovated in my time here now 6 residence halls. We started with Nunn Hall, did a complete renovation. Then we went to the then we went to Alumni Tower next, then the Manon Complex, the tower, east, west, and Manon. So all of those have been renovated. We spent about $28 million in those renovations. And so think about the numbers previously. Now we're at about $100 million that we've spent, all for the benefit of students at the university, in academic programs and in residence halls. And of course, currently underway, we've got some really big time projects underway as we speak right now. So I think Dr. Doran probably would be pleased. I would hope so. I never had the pleasure of meeting him. He had passed about 2 years before I came, but his wife, Manon, and she insisted we call her Nani. Nani became good friends of mine and Sue's, and we visited with her many times, and they were very, very proud of their time here, their association with Morehead State, and what they accomplished here. So I always view my work as the president of building on the foundation that those before me left behind. And that's really what I've tried to do, is make it better than how I found it. No criticism of any of those that came before me. They had to deal with whatever they had to deal with, budgets and the reality of the situation. We've been able to do some things here.
After you were hired for president, did you find yourself researching the local histories of the campus and events? And if you did, what particular history stood out to you?
Well, yeah, I absolutely did that. In fact, I did a lot of homework before I even applied for this job. I was not in search of a job when I was approached on this. In fact, I'll tell you how it happened. Dr. Stanton, who was the president of East Tennessee, was contacted by the search firm that was doing the search for this job. And they wanted him to apply for it. He laughed and he said, "No, I'm at a stage in my career, I'm not going anywhere." But he said, "I've got a guy working for me that really ought to be the president of the university, and I'm going to talk to him about this and encourage him to apply." I was very surprised when he called me into his office and he said, "I've been contacted by folks that are doing the search for Morehead. I think you should apply." And my first question was, "Dr. Stanton, I'm your vice president for administration, the chief operating officer of this place. You sure you want me to go?" And he said, "No, I don't want you to go, but I think you should apply." So that's kind of how it started. Well, then I knew something about Morehead because in my discipline, engineering technology, I knew some of the people that worked here, Dr. Zagari and some of his colleagues. I had met these individuals and knew of them. So I was aware of the institution. So I started to do my homework, and I really spent a lot of time looking at the profiles of the institution, the funding of the institution, the academic programs, and really tried to learn everything that I could learn. So when I arrived here, I had a pretty good sense. Now, once I accepted the job, Keith Capus, who was the vice president for university advancement at the time, sent me the chair of the history department that wrote the Light into the Mountains, History of Morehead State University. Yeah, Dr. Flatt's book. I couldn't come up with his name right quick. And so I read that before I came up. And I was intrigued by that because it's a pretty darn good history from the beginning through 1997, I think it was. And so it highlighted some of the important developments. That's where I really became acquainted with Dr. Doran and really what he accomplished. There was a big section there. Before we started talking this morning, as you were describing some of the people you've interviewed, Marshall Banks, who was the first African-American student here at Morehead State University, he was brought here by Dr. Doran. He was from Ashland to integrate intercollegiate athletics at Morehead State. Dr. Doran had a lot of courage to do that because it was not a popular thing. So I learned about Marshall Banks, and I learned about those early years. I learned about the Rowan County Wars that led to the foundation, the formulation of this place by Dr. Frank Button and his mother, Phoebe. So it was very, very informative. And I think the most important thing I got out of that was that this place had a long history and was central to the lives of people in the region that we serve, Eastern Kentucky in particular, but now much broader than that because we're a true comprehensive university. So I had a really good sense of how important this place was, in a sense, a place for the people that we are charged to serve in particular.
All the other former presidents we've asked had a bit of finality to this question. Now, we don't have any finality to it, but it's a terrible question, and I apologize, but I have to ask. what do you feel has been your greatest accomplishments here in your tenure as president? It's obviously not over, so.
Right, yeah, that's right. We don't have an end date yet. We have a beginning date, not an end date. Well, I think really what I'm most proud of in the grand scheme of things is I believe I've brought vision and planning and energy to the university. I'm a great believer in planning the work and working the plan. I mean, if you look at anything we've accomplished, none of this was done on the spur of the moment. It was all done because we've created a thoughtful process. In fact, 2 years ago, we updated the campus master plan. It's probably the best master plan that I've seen, and I've looked at a lot of them. We hired good people, and then most importantly, we invited the broad community into the discussion of the plan itself, the development of the plan, what we could become. And it'll guide the development of the institution for the next 10 to 15 years. So if I would have dropped dead tomorrow and be gone, the next president could come in and pick the plan up and carry on, because it wouldn't be Wayne's plan. It's the plan for the university, developed by and for the people that work here. So I think bringing vision